All right, I'll get started. It's 1 minute past 2. Welcome everyone to the second idea generating event, co-sponsored by the Office of Vice President of Research and the Provost Office. And I'm from the Jaideep Kapur from the Brain Institute, welcoming you. We'll start off hearing our charge from the Vice President for Research, Ramasubramanian. Ram, go ahead.
Yes, Jaideep, thank you very much. Thank you all for taking the time to attend this idea generation event. Today's topic being aging and neurodegeneration. And the whole idea of our session is to generate ideas for topics that UVA can pursue, which is based on the talent that we already have and infrastructure we have, and the results, the prior accomplishments that we have made. And so this way we can focus our investments and move the area further to have significant societal impact. So the way you can participate in this is based on your point of view, where you're coming from into this topic, your experiences. Offer topics for a panel discussion in the fall. Topics could be we could summarize these topics from the issues and the challenges that you discuss and present to this group. So we could construct an interdisciplinary panel. The aging and neurodegeneration, as you know, is a broad interdisciplinary area going all the way from molecular, basis for neurodegeneration, all the way to, caregivers, impact on caregivers, and the societal impact, and there's even an economic component to this. So given the breadth of the topic, this is an idea generation, a brainstorming session to bring the best based on your experiences. And thank you, Jaideep. I look forward to hearing the discussions and go from there. Back to you, Jaideep.
Thanks, Ram. And Megan Barnett from the Provost Office will speak at the end of the session. Briefly, some of the rules for this session are in your chat box. You can open them. And also remember that you'll have 3 breakout sessions after Carol Manning speaks, and Amy will give you instructions. So to give a broad overview of today's charge is Carol Manning. So Carol, go ahead.
Thanks, Jaideep, and thank you, Ram. I thank you everyone for coming here today. I think this is a really exciting initiative, and it gives us the opportunity to both coalesce and to grow our UVA neuroscience community. And just to remind people, our neuroscience community crosses departments and schools. We are finding more and more people are involved in brain science every day. I think it's fair to say that we are stronger working synergistically when we work together, and I think the grand challenge can allow us to do this. We want to expand our strengths, but we also want to encourage novel ideas. And this grand challenges effort can help us move to the next level and position us for greater national recognition. An example of this would be with NIH funding as an Alzheimer's disease center, which we came very close to getting. And that's similar to the Cancer Center comprehensive status. I think that's really where we need to go in terms of moving forward. But a big goal is to connect our work, including from cells to society, meaning everything from bench science to clinical trials to caregiver research to normal cognitive aging. And this can bridge areas. We should be inclusive and create a continuum. And as I mentioned, I think the cognitive aging is part of this, along with dementia and TBI. We can see this as a continuum and be open to all kinds of ideas that play on our strengths. So even though we're moving into separate breakout sessions, I encourage everyone to brainstorm in ways that increases our synergy to come up with grand plans moving forward. So thank you everyone for being here.
Okay, thank you, Carol. So at this point, we'll transition to the breakout sessions. So for today, we have three concurrent 25-minute sessions. So John Lukens and Carol Manning will lead a session on dementia from cells to society. There's a session on mechanisms of cognitive aging that Jamie Morris and Per Sederberg will lead. And then there's a third session on traumatic brain injury that Matt Panzer and James Stone will lead.
All right, welcome back. I think most of you have been kicked out of your breakout rooms and brought back to the main room. What we'll do is hear back reports from the three groups, and I'll begin with the top on my list, Dementia from Cells to Society. John Lukens and Carol Manning are reporting back since you guys were leading the group.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you. That was a really interesting breakout session, and I will talk about the themes. I think one of the big themes is that we have a lot of people who are interested in aging and neurodegeneration who are doing work in it. I met people who I didn't know were doing anything in that area. And so one of the themes was how can we join together so that we aren't duplicating efforts, things like sharing things effectively like animals or resources. How do we encourage, can we use this to encourage people to go into neurodegeneration or aging, things that we talked about in terms of the P30, that is the Alzheimer's Disease Center, that creates pilot funding that moves us to a place so that when we go back in 2023, that we are stronger and have demonstrated that our strengths have grown and that we are a group that works together effectively. For example, there are 14 people at UVA working in neurodegenerative disease alone, and there probably are more. There is someone else coming in the fall. So funding to help people move into neurodegenerative disease who have interest but are not there at this point. People from computer science, is there a platform for engineers to bridge to clinicians? And another theme was we want to be as broad as possible, including aging across the lifespan, including pain, inflammation, neurodegenerative disease. Another theme was looking at early detection, moving all the way to neurodegeneration. And I think I will stop there.
All right. John, anything to add to that since you were co-chairing?
Yeah, I'll add a couple points or emphasize some things a little bit more. So one of the discussion points that we had was thinking more broadly about the aging process and how to limit aging as it's relevant to all neurodegenerative diseases, and talked a little bit about what are the best models for aging, and if we could kind of maximize those. A lot of the animal models that people are using now don't necessarily recapitulate aging in humans. So there was an idea about using a natural environment or a sociability to kind of revolutionize how people are using small models to look at aging. And then, another point that came up that I think was important was that basically aging can be a scary thing for graduate students and postdocs because it takes so long. So figuring out ways to kind of incentivize groups to put people onto aging projects, or to have a way to have a bank where people could go to and get aging samples, whatever they may be. And then another thing that really came up was better utilizing BME and the interest over there in terms of what they're doing in terms of vascularization and some soft tissue models to better utilize some of our engineering colleagues to get at some of these questions. So those were just two of the ones that I felt like kind of came up that weren't covered all that extensively in Carol's review, but she did a great job.
Mechanisms of Cognitive Aging. So Jamie Morris and Per Sederberg.
Jamie, do you want to go first or should I hop in? Can y'all hear me? Awesome. I'll go first. We also touched on, similar to what Carol just said, touched on this, I'll start kind of at the end, but I think it encompasses the whole thing, is this desire to focus not necessarily just on end of life, but lifespan cognition. And so cognition starting even from neonatally all the way through the lifespan, and then how that might, how you have branches of this continuum of cognition through there. Another key idea put forward was really to focus not just on say pharmacological or clinical interventions, but also explore on top of that what are these modifiable behaviors, or really study the contributing factors and look for interventions that we could have that would have a quick impact. And one example was looking at the relationship between hearing loss and cognitive decline, and forming interdisciplinary teams that could then go from basic science to clinical applications there as well. Another idea put forward was to look at on the role of metabolism in cognitive decline, and then with there was the discussion in relation to these modifiable behaviors, but also how do we bring as many people together as possible, and perhaps reviving some sort of overlapping lecture groups that could bring these different communities together to form interdisciplinary teams. And then finally, I just want to mention an idea at the end of looking at these mixed family cognition through the lifespan that Kevin Pelfrey was suggesting, of having recruiting entire families to track them through time. And then in relation, there was another bit I'll just throw in as well, is expansion of and transformation of what currently is telehealth to encompass far more, because what we need to do is move beyond just the communities that are hovered around all of our research centers across the country and get out into the country, explore and really look not just at the people that can come into where there's a 3T scanner and we can measure them. We need to go out into the communities even more. And so expanding the telehealth infrastructure of deploying applications, cognitive and quantitative and hearing and mobility assessment all remotely, and being able to bring all of that information back was another idea we discussed. Jamie, other thoughts there?
Yeah, just to add to the last point that Per made, was that we have to have recognition to the idea that if we're studying cognitive mechanisms of aging and change, that if we're only capturing one spectrum of it, which is community members that are aging well and are volunteering because they have the time and are willing to be had, we're not capturing populations with risk factors. We're not capturing people that otherwise might not show up until they show up at a clinic, that they've already been experiencing things like dementia or some other age-related disorders. And if we want to understand fully the full spectrum of cognitive aging, then we have to start with that in mind. And one place for that, obviously, is as Per mentioned, a big expansion into what kinds of tools can we use to give better representation across the state of Virginia, for instance. And then what kind of ways can we, as researchers, work to share together interesting populations, interesting risk groups, risk factors, and include them in our studies so we can make some kind of difference there. Last point I'll make is that I brought it up at the beginning that UVA has a history of having very good innovation in terms of measurement and statistical analysis across the lifespan. There's still people that work well in that realm. So there's a lot of expertise in various parts, but that doesn't get us fully there without the right levels of samples and right access to new types of measurements that we should develop and types of populations that we should be studying.
All right, thank you guys. And then traumatic brain injury, Matt Panzer and James Stone.
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, we had a slightly different conversation in our approach to looking at this grand challenge. We really feel that UVA is quite prominent in TBI in many different areas across many different disciplines, from engineering all the way to school of medicine, and researchers pretty much across grounds. The biggest challenge for us is linking all those disciplines together to actually form a bigger, more cohesive center that's comparable to some of the world's leading comprehensive centers that we've identified. And so we've really looked at this grand challenge as a way of facilitating building something bigger, not necessarily targeting key research topics, with the idea that when you get people together, especially multiple disciplines, then those ideas just naturally come about. We talked about a number of key topological areas that we think we could invest in for traumatic brain injury, and we'll have those up on the ideas. We have 4 pages of document. But really our focus is using the grand challenge to link our TBI researchers and other folks who work in this discipline or similar disciplines together so that we can actually manifest new research hypotheses and generate those high level and high impact proposals with the NIH and the DOD or the DOT. And so that's really what we were focusing on, building the center model to have kind of the most impact for us at university going to a preeminent institution. We've identified a few areas, particularly in clinical TBI care, that we would also like to address. And I think a lot of that will be helped by having a center-based model to bring different organizations together and different groups together to help standardize processes, identify critical hiring. We have a few on the research side and possibly 1 or 2 on the clinical side that will really elevate UVA as an entire institution. And so that's kind of our look. It was much more holistic, I think, and planning how do we build something bigger. And I think that was kind of what we're trying to interpret the intent from the president and VPR in terms of the investment from the grand challenges. So I don't know, James, do you have any more to add, or some of the other folks from the TBI group?
No, I think that was a nice summary, and just to reiterate, there are a number of existing strengths here for TBI at UVA. The Center of Applied Biomechanics up at North Fork is really, I think, a differentiating element of TBI at UVA that has a very strong engineering component. Of course, there's a strong preclinical translational component at the School of Medicine. There's a strong athletics component within the School of Education as well. And there's a solid track record of sustainable federal foundation and Commonwealth-based funding as well. I will add that we talked a little bit about some of the sustainable funding models that have proved successful in other states, such as Pennsylvania and Kentucky, where those are both states where there is a sustainable program that invests in TBI centers that has proved to be quite successful at the University of Pittsburgh and the University of Pennsylvania, as well as the University of Kentucky. There is an initial framework of that through the Commonwealth Neurotrauma Initiative here in Virginia, and with the right framework for investment, there are certainly opportunities to expand those discussions with using Kentucky and Pennsylvania as examples to allow for a vibrant, thriving TBI community at UVA to allow to continue to be successful for many years going forward.
Good, thanks. So we have about 7 minutes for an open discussion, summative thoughts, or people. Now you've heard reports from all three groups. I want to hear from you all. Anybody? Feel free to unmute yourself and speak.
Jaideep, I just want to say that the comments that Dr. Panzer just made, I thought are actually applicable to the other areas, that we ought to think about centerness and how to bring teams together as kind of a generating these foci.
Thanks. I agree.
Other thoughts? I mean, that's been brought up, and that's how NIH funds, as you know, bringing together clinicians and scientists together. It creates these center grants. Other idea, well, I'll remind you that these talks are available offline via. So we'll post them on their YouTube videos of these talks. And again, reminder that please post your ideas on Idea Notes website so that we can keep track of them. I saw some documents floating around. If you can post them, that would be good. But other thoughts that integrate these ideas?
Well, I have a thought, Jaideep, but it's not necessarily integrating. I think that what we're seeing in these breakout sessions, or in this session in particular, is that as one looks at this problem, the umbrella becomes larger and larger and larger. And it actually becomes really, really difficult to eventually see a significant, to see an investment of the size that we have to actually move the needle in any one area. So naturally, I think it's a good thing, you know, that people want to come together. There's no question about this. This is a good thing to be talking about, but it's going to be quite challenging, you know, to coalesce efforts into a few number of buckets where one can really significantly change the needle for all of, you know, neurodegeneration, age-related, TBI-related work on campus. I can't offer a quick solution here. I just want to remind us that talking about these things, talking about commonalities is always a good thing. And I think hopefully there will not be animosities resulting in the end when money doesn't spread into every single corner of neuroscience on this campus. So
I sincerely hope so. Sincerely hope so that would happen. And we can, I mean, it'll be up to the community to figure out mechanisms to prioritize. I think we'll hear from, so maybe I want to hear for a couple minutes, how does Ram prioritize this? or Megan, how do you guys want to approach Harry's problem? He brings it up to me every time I go to him.
Jaideep, John has his hand raised.
John, go ahead.
So I think part of maybe a healthier exercise would be asking like, where is neuroscience going to be in 10, 20 years, and how can we be there first? I mean, these are all, like, a lot of the topics that I've heard so far are just like, you know, they're pretty straightforward. We're just kind of talking about infrastructure that's already here and how to make it better. But what I'm really lacking is this vision about how we're going to be preeminent. And you know, I haven't heard it yet, and I think that's where we should almost be brainstorming. Where is neuroscience going to be in 10 to 20 years, and how are we going to be there first? And I'm not sure I'm necessarily hearing it from any of the discussions.
So you're looking for a vision thing. Other thoughts?
Yeah, so I differ a little bit in my thinking. If our goal is to cure Alzheimer's disease, there are people all over the world who've been trying to do this for a long time. I don't think that's a realistic goal for us, but I think we talked about significant strengths and that we need to build on those strengths while being inclusive for even greater preeminence. And so from my perspective, an example of that is the P30 caregiver research that is very inclusive, involving rural people and African Americans, because that is something that is a strength of ours. And that is somewhere that is an area that grand challenges can push us even farther ahead.
If I could just add to Carol's comments, I totally agree with John that it's important for us to be forward thinking. But serendipity when it comes to scientific discovery is often very difficult to legislate. What you really have to do is to basically create the natural conditions that are going to allow for scientific discovery to most effectively come forward. And so I'd love to know what's coming down the line in 10 years and be able to get there. But I think more importantly, from a structural perspective, we have to make sure that these areas are absolutely optimized in order to be able to allow for serendipitous transformative discovery to occur.
Yeah, and also follow up that too. And I think that comes when we start getting many different disciplines together that are not necessarily thinking in the same track all the time. It's where we start taking my examples, engineering, and couple that with neuroimaging or preclinical models, where we start finding out that the place where we move the bar is in spots where no one's looking yet because they don't have the expertise to look at it in both directions. And so multidisciplinary approaches and getting multidisciplines together, I think, is the way that we get to that 5 and 10 years down the road. Like James said, we're not going to predict what that is because we're not doing that right now. And we're waiting for that investment to help drive and build the model and the infrastructure to get to those 5, 10 years down the road.
I'm going to call on Kevin Lee to make a brief comment, since he's been around and has seen many, many strategic plans, before I ask Megan to sum it up and send her home. Kevin, briefly.
Briefly to sum it up. You've got to prioritize things. I mean, I'll give you an example. When we decided to go into making a center for deafness, which never really took off, the whole goal of that was a long-term aging goal to limit social isolation. I think that kind of forward-looking in specific areas, like perhaps what John is talking about is looking at something that you can see going into the future, ties into what Matt was saying as well. We're not going to do everything for everyone with $50 million. It's just not going to happen. So I think you've got to take certain strengths and then maybe take a couple of flyers.
All right. So we're coming to the end of the session, and Megan Barnett is from Provost Office is here. She has participated in strategic planning for Yale, who they invested in neuroscience recently. So even though she has a law background, I'm not going to hold it against her. Megan, go ahead.
All right. So, on behalf of the VPR's office and the Provost Office, thank you all for participating today. I was really impressed by the amount of preparation some of you had put into this, and by the conversations that you had in the breakout rooms. It's amazing what a range of schools and departments and disciplines are represented here. But I have to say, I really also appreciated the last 5 minutes and that debate, because I think that is one of the things that we're going to have to struggle with, is how to prioritize, how to bring people together. And it really struck me what Carol said at the very beginning in her opening remarks, that our research is better and we're stronger together. And so I appreciated all of you talking with us, but also with each other. And I hope that you'll continue those conversations. And I look forward to working with you on this in the coming years. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And remember, idea notes, put your ideas down. This is on video, YouTube. Also, you can definitely participate in many different ways. So thank you.